Saturday morning, 2013. Kids eating cereal, watching Clone Wars on Cartoon Network. Star Wars was safe, right? Good versus evil, heroes always win. Then parents walked in to find their children watching a hero get impaled with a lightsaber while confessing his forbidden love.
I always will.
Dying in his arms as the villain savored every second. This is about The Lawless, the episode that forgot it was for kids. Before we can talk about why this episode shattered boundaries, we need to understand what the Clone Wars was supposed to be. It started simple enough. Fill in the gaps between Episode 2 and Episode 3. Show us the war. Give us adventures with Anakin and Obi-Wan. Sell some toys. But somewhere around Season 3, something shifted. The show stopped pretending war was an adventure. Stories got longer, darker, more complex. Characters we loved started dying. Not disappearing in a puff of smoke like battle droids, but dying, gasping, suffering, mourning. The Darth Maul arc was where the mask finally slipped completely. Here was a villain who'd been literally cut in half, surviving on pure hatred, returning not for galactic conquest, but for something far more disturbing, personal revenge. And in The Lawless, he got it. Now, I know what you're thinking. But wait, what about when Ahsoka got hunted for sport? What about the Umbra arc where clones killed each other? You're right, the Clone Wars had dark episodes before, but those were about war being hell. This was about cruelty being personal, and that's a very different kind of darkness. To understand why The Lawless hit different, you need context that the show spent years building. Darth Maul and his brother Savage Opress had conquered Mandalore. Yes, the planet from The Mandalorian, but this isn't that story. This Mandalore was ruled by Duchess Satine Kryze, a pacifist in a galaxy at war, trying desperately to keep her people neutral. But here's the part that matters. Satine and Obi-Wan had history. Years before he'd been assigned to protect her, and they'd fallen in love. The Jedi who followed every rule, who lectures Anakin about attachment, had almost left the Order for her. Almost. The show spent 3 seasons dancing around this relationship. Stolen glances, careful words, the kind of restraint that makes every moment electric. This wasn't kiddie romance. This was adult regret. The road not taken. The love that duty killed. So when Maul captured Satine and sent a message to bring Obi-Wan to Mandalore, we thought we knew the playbook. Star Wars rescue mission, right? Daring escape, last-minute save, heroes fly off into the sunset? We were so wrong. This wasn't going to end with a rescue. This was Shakespeare in space, and Maul was writing the final act. The throne room scene starts like 100 other Star Wars confrontations. Obi-Wan enters, lightsaber ready. Maul monologues from the throne he's stolen. Satine's imprisoned but alive. We've seen this before. Then Maul says the words that change everything. I will take everything from you, as you took everything from me. Not defeat you, not kill you. Take everything from you. What follows is 4 minutes of television that Cartoon Network had no business airing at 9:30 in the morning. Satine, facing death, finally says what she couldn't for years. I've always loved you, Obi-Wan. And Obi-Wan, perfect Jedi Obi-Wan, breaks. Had you said the word, I would have left the Jedi Order. Let that sink in. These characters just admitted their entire lives were built on a sacrifice that maybe didn't need to happen. 20 years of denial, duty, and loneliness, confessed in what they know are her last moments. Then Maul does it. No grand gesture, no fight. He just pulls Satine across the room with the Force and runs the Darksaber. That same Darksaber everyone fights over in The Mandalorian, straight through her chest. But here's the part that haunted kids for years. It's not quick. Satine doesn't disappear or fall dramatically. She staggers to Obi-Wan, collapses in his arms, and with her last breath whispers, "Remember me, my dear Obi-Wan. I've loved you always." The camera holds on Obi-Wan's face as she dies. This isn't hero's grief. This is human devastation. Raw, ugly, complete. The kind of pain that fundamentally changes who you are. And Maul, he just watches, savoring it, because this was never about winning. It was about making Obi-Wan suffer. Why this was too dark. The real analysis. You want to know why parents wrote letters to Cartoon Network. Why this episode got pulled from certain rerun cycles. It wasn't the violence. Star Wars always had violence. It was the cruelty. Think about every other Star Wars death. Qui-Gon died fighting. Padme died of sadness. Melodramatic, but not cruel. Even Order 66, brutal as it was, had the mercy of being quick. But this was targeted. Psychological torture. Maul didn't kill Satine because she was a threat. He killed her because he knew it would destroy Obi-Wan. He turned love into a weapon. That's not something you typically explain to your 8-year-old over breakfast. But it goes deeper. This episode taught kids that sometimes heroes don't save the day. Sometimes they watch helplessly as everything they care about is destroyed. Obi-Wan doesn't get a heroic moment. He doesn't even get to fight. He just holds the woman he loves while she dies, then gets thrown in prison. The hero is completely, utterly defeated. Not by strength or strategy, but by pure malice. Compare this to Empire Strikes Back. Sure, Luke loses a hand and finds out Vader is his father. Shocking, yes, but he escapes. He has hope. There's a plan to save Han. The Empire won, but the heroes regrouped. In the Lawless, there's no regrouping, no hope spot. Just Obi-Wan screaming Satine's name in a prison cell, while Maul's laughter echoes through the palace. This wasn't darkness with purpose. This was darkness that said, sometimes terrible things happen to good people, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. That's not a lesson Saturday morning cartoons usually teach. Production courage and controversy. Dave Filoni, the supervising director, knew exactly what he was doing. In later interviews, he described this as the moment the Clone Wars grew up. But growing up meant traumatizing a generation of kids in the process. James Arnold Taylor, who voiced Obi-Wan, has talked about recording that final scene. How they did take after take of him crying Satine's name, each one more broken than the last. He said he had to go to places he'd never gone as a voice actor. Real grief, real loss. Anna Graves, Satine's voice actor, recorded her death scene in one take. One. Because in her words, we all knew this had to hurt. The network had concerns. Of course they did. But the episode had already been produced, the arc already in motion. The international versions actually edited it differently. Some countries cut away from the impalement, others blurred it. The American broadcast showed everything. Parental reaction was mixed. Some praised the show for not talking down to children. Others were furious that their safe Star Wars show had subjected kids to what was essentially a graphic murder scene. But here's the interesting part. This episode rarely appears on Best Clone Wars Episodes lists. Not because it's bad, it's technically masterful, but because it's uncomfortable. Even adult fans struggle with it. It's easier to celebrate the triumph of the Siege of Mandalore than the tragedy of the Lawless. The ripple effect. This episode changed Star Wars forever, and I'm not being hyperbolic. Every piece of darker Star Wars content that came after, Rogue One's ending, Andor's prison arc, even moments in the sequels, can trace its DNA back to this moment when a kids' show decided kids could handle real darkness. But more importantly, it changed Obi-Wan Kenobi forever. Rewatch A New Hope now. That hello there to Luke isn't just a kindly old hermit greeting. It's a man who lost everything, His order, his friends, his love, choosing to be kind anyway. The prequels showed us why Obi-Wan went into exile. The Clone Wars showed us why he stayed there for 20 years. The kids who watched this episode in 2013, they're adults now. Some of them are making Star Wars content, and you can feel it. That willingness to let Star Wars be genuinely painful, not just explosively dramatic. This episode taught a generation that Star Wars could hurt you, really hurt you, not with shock value or surprise twists, but with emotional violence that stays with you. The beautiful darkness. Here's the thing though, and this might be controversial, Star Wars needed this episode, because kids deserve better than sanitized loss. They know the world can be cruel, they see it, they feel it. What they need are stories that acknowledge that darkness while showing them how to face it. The artistry of this episode is undeniable. The music, Kevin Kiner's score, swells with Satine's theme before cutting to silence at her death. The animation, the way light fades from Satine's eyes, the way Obi-Wan's hands shake. The voice performance, you can hear Obi-Wan age 10 years in 4 minutes. This is the Star Wars equivalent of Bambi's mom dying. A formative trauma that teaches kids something essential. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes being good isn't enough. Sometimes the worst thing imaginable happens, and you have to find a way to keep going. That's not too dark for kids. That's preparing them for life. So here we are, over a decade later, still talking about 4 minutes of a cartoon that aired on Saturday morning. Still processing what it meant to watch a hero completely broken. A love story that ended in the worst possible way. This wasn't the Star Wars episode kids deserved, but maybe it was the one they needed. Because Star Wars had always promised that good triumphs over evil. The lawless asked a harder question. What do you do when it doesn't? The paradox is perfect. An episode too dark for kids that those same kids remember more vividly than any other, because it didn't talk down to them. It didn't protect them. It trusted them to handle difficult truth. Maybe that's the real lesson. Star Wars was never just for kids. It was for kids brave enough to face the dark and still choose the light. Kids who could watch their hero lose everything and understand why he keeps fighting anyway. That Saturday morning in 2013, between Pokemon and regular show, Star Wars grew up. And it took a generation of kids with it. So I have to ask, where were you when you watched The Lawless? Were you one of those kids on the living room floor, cereal forgotten, watching Obi-Wan's world shatter? Or did you discover it later, unprepared for a Clone Wars episode that would leave you staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m.? What Clone Wars moment shocked you as a kid? Because if this show taught us anything, it's that sometimes the stories that scar us are the ones that shape us most. Drop a comment below, like if this episode destroyed you too. Subscribe for more deep dives into the Star Wars moments that forgot they were supposed to be family friendly.